All right, today we are diving into something, well, pretty provocative. It's a scientific paper that really takes a critical look at the very foundations of how we think about modern trauma therapy.
I bet you've heard this idea a million times, right? It's kind of the main story we're all told, that traumatic memories are somehow different. They get trapped or frozen or unprocessed in our brains, and they cause all this distress until a professional can come in and help us process them and put them away correctly.
And get this, that one single idea, that concept of stuck trauma, well, it's not just a theory. It's the bedrock of a huge multi-billion-dollar global industry. We're talking $10 billion plus every single year built on this one core concept.
But what if it's all built on a metaphor? What if this whole idea of a stuck memory isn't actually a scientific fact, but just a really powerful story we've started to believe is real? That's the rabbit hole we're jumping into today.
Okay, so let's break this down. To really get a grip on how this massive industry works, we first have to look at the 5 core ideas, the assumptions that it's all built upon. So it's basically a step-by-step logic, right? First, the theory says traumatic memories are stored incorrectly. Step 2, these stuck memories are what cause all the symptoms. Step 3, to get better, you have to see a professional who has special techniques to process them. And here's the kicker. Step 5, without this specific professional help, you're probably not going to get better on your own. As the paper points out, this whole chain of thought, that's the bedrock of the entire industry.
So how do the authors of this paper test these big assumptions? Well, they zoom in on one of the most popular and well-known trauma therapies out there, EMDR. They use it as a kind of case study. So you might be asking, what exactly is EMDR? In a nutshell, it's where a client thinks about a traumatic event while doing something called bilateral stimulation. That just means stimulating both sides of your body, and usually it's done by having you follow a therapist's finger back and forth with your eyes. The big idea here, the core theory, is that this specific action, the eye movement, is what helps the brain finally process that memory that's been supposedly stuck.
But here's the thing. Almost right away, EMDR started getting some serious pushback from the scientific community. You've got this quote from Harvard psychologist Richard McNally, and it's pretty famous. He basically said, look, the parts of EMDR that actually work, like, talking through the trauma, that's nothing new. We do that in lots of other therapies. And the part that is new, the eye movements, well, that part might not be effective at all. And this leads to a really fantastic thought experiment. Okay, stick with me here, because this is a great analogy. The paper calls it purple hat therapy. Imagine you go to a therapist who is really effective, using standard, proven techniques. But while they're doing the therapy, they're also wearing a big, silly purple hat. Now, the patients get better. So, does that mean the purple hat has some kind of magical healing power? Or is it just, a hat, an extra thing that has nothing to do with what's actually working? The paper makes the argument that the eye movements in EMDR could very well be that purple hat.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The authors of the paper highlight what they see as a kind of pattern. They point out that when the first studies came out and found the eye movements didn't really do anything, the response wasn't, oh, maybe we're wrong. Instead, it was, well, the researchers must not have been trained properly. So, okay, they did more studies with officially trained researchers, and they still found no effect from the eye movements. So what was the response then? Well, they need advanced training. The paper suggests this starts to look less like a scientific investigation and more like a brand trying to protect its key feature.
Okay, so if the eye movements are just a purple hat, then that makes us question the whole foundation, right? Are memories even stuck in the first place? To figure that out, we have to peel back another layer and look at what neuroscience actually tells us about how memory works.
And this slide, wow, this really lays out the central conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the therapy model, which is basically a computer metaphor, right? A trauma is a corrupted file or a frozen document that needs fixing. But on the other side, you have what modern neuroscience actually shows us, and it's a completely different picture. Memory isn't like a video we just play back. Every single time we remember something, our brain is actively rebuilding that memory from scratch. It's a creative process. And this is so key. If that's true, there's no frozen file that can get stuck. The whole premise starts to fall apart.
So if it's not a stuck memory file, then what in the world is going on with trauma? The paper offers a different idea. It's not about the past, it's about the present state of our nervous system. Think about it. After you go through something terrifying, your body's alarm system can get stuck in the on position. Symptoms like hypervigilance, that feeling of always being on edge, scanning for danger, they aren't seen as a mistake or a broken part. No, they're an incredibly smart survival system that's just working in the wrong context. So the problem isn't a broken memory from back then. It's a nervous system that's calibrated for threat right now.
All right, so if the special techniques aren't really unsticking memories, then what actually helps people get better? What does the evidence say is the real engine of healing?
This chart gets at something that's famously called the dodo bird verdict in psychology. It comes from Alice in Wonderland, where a dodo bird judges a race and says, everybody has won and all must have prizes. It's this wild finding that when you compare all these different types of therapy against each other, they all tend to work about equally well. But why? Well, it's because the research consistently shows that the specific technique a therapist uses, that's just a tiny little slice of the pie. The huge majority of what makes therapy work are things called common factors and things about the client themselves.
So, what are these common factors that seem to be so powerful? Well, it's the stuff that pretty much all good therapy has in common. It's things like having a really strong, trusting relationship with your therapist. That's called the therapeutic alliance. It's your own expectation that you're going to get better. And it's being given a new, hopeful story or framework to make sense of your experience. At the end of the day, it's the human connection and the hope, not the special technique, that seems to be doing the heavy lifting.
But honestly, this next point might be the most shocking thing the paper brings up. A huge review of studies found that almost half of all people with PTSD, we're talking between 44 and 52%, get better without any professional therapy at all. It's called spontaneous recovery. And that fact right there directly smashes that core assumption of the industry that says you need a professional with a special technique to heal.
Wow. Okay, so that data just forces you to rethink the entire model, doesn't it? If the fancy techniques aren't the magic ingredient, and if nearly half of people recover on their own, then what does a new framework for trauma and recovery actually look like?
This table just lays it all out so clearly. You've got the old stuck trauma model on one side. The problem? Unprocessed memory. The target? The past event. The source of healing? Those specific techniques. But then you have this alternative framework that the paper is proposing. Here, the core problem is a nervous system that's calibrated for threat, right now. The target of therapy becomes creating safety and regulation in the present moment. And the source of healing? It's those powerful common factors, and crucially, our own body's natural capacity to recover. So where do we go from here? The paper suggests a completely new direction. First, let's stop focusing on fixing memories and start focusing on helping regulate the nervous system in the here and now. Second, let's learn to respect and support the body's incredible innate ability to heal itself. Third, let's prioritize the things we know work, like that human connection in therapy. And finally, let's look at the whole person, their life, their relationships, their environment, not just what's happening inside their head.
In the end, this whole critical look isn't saying therapy is useless, not at all. But it leaves us with this huge, profound question that really challenges a multi-billion-dollar industry. What if healing isn't about processing the past? What if it's all about creating safety in the present? That's a powerful idea to sit with.